International window, last one for the United States women's national team. They're going to close out their calendar year facing off against Germany. It's going to be number 1 versus number 3 in terms of the FIFA ranked teams going head to head here. And they're going to settle up with their first friendly out in Florida. That's going to take place Tuesday, November the 11th in Fort Lauderdale, and Sunday, November the 13th at Red Bull Arena in Harrison, New Jersey. Let's start with that. Let's start with that energy. We've got United States closing out 2022 against Germany. Lori, I'm gonna go to you first on this because I feel like Lisa and I have chatted a little bit about this in other episodes, just talking about like the energy around a game like this. So for you, I want to get like your thoughts and or your reactions, like when you saw that like the news drop that this team was going to close out 2022 against Germany. Like what were some of your thoughts and reactions?
Yeah, I mean, excited because these are the games you want to play in as a player. You want to watch them as a fan. This is what I actually had the privilege of calling Germany quite a bit in the Euros, and they were my favorite team. I think they're an exciting team and kind of feel like they're back to maybe they were when they had a little bit of like their dynasty in the 2000s, so early 2000s. So yeah, I mean, I think, and it gives the U.S. team like a really good, I think, gauge on where they are. I think there'll be some similarities in terms of like the England match and like how each of these teams match up. But yeah, I think going in is the last international break, as you mentioned, Sandra, and hopefully ending on a high note for the U.S., but also really getting a good understanding of where they need to fine tune some things, clean some things up, but also are like really accelerating or excelling headed into World Cup year, which is even more awesome.
Yeah. No. It's a great point to bring up in terms of like the head to head between these two teams. Like Lisa, I'll go with you to this one. It's kind of like these two teams are kind of like reuniting for the first time in a little while in terms of how long it's been since they've been able to face off each other individually, whether it's been like in international windows or like in like other huge international tournaments, right? So we're talking about 5-ish years going on here between these two sides.
Yeah, I mean the history between the United States and Germany it goes back a long time, right? Like 33 matches between these two sides. It's something like 17 meetings in the United States, and the United States currently has a record of 11, 2, and 3 in those previous 16 meetings that have been played in the United States. But the last time they played was in 2018 in the She Believes Cup, right? The last 3 times that Germany and the United States have faced each other, it's been in the She Believes Cup. So that a big gap from 2018 in that She Believes Cup until now is the longest gap that these teams have had where they haven't played each other. And if you think back to 2018, March of She Believes Cup, it was in Ohio. We were talking a little bit about Ohio off mic here, but in March in Ohio, I mean, not the greatest weather. I don't know if you guys remember this game, but it was like cold, snowy, windy. It was like a pretty miserable game to watch. I mean, I can't imagine playing in that. And I played soccer in Wisconsin. Like I just couldn't even. And the United States win it 1-0. And something like the last 3 matchups have all been 1-goal differences between the United States and Germany. So heading into this match and this pair of friendlies, which is going to be the 17th meeting in the United States for these two teams, the 34th overall meeting. It's another European matchup for the United States, right? They're coming off of those Spain and England friendlies that they played in Europe just about a month's time ago, and now going up against Germany, a team that both sides know each other very well. And I think when we look a little bit deeper, Lori, to your point about knowing this German side from the Euros and what they did earlier in the summer, it's a lot of the same players that we're going to see playing in these friendlies against the United States.
No, Lori, you don't want to follow up on
that? Yeah, I mean, it is. It's certainly, I mean, I had mentioned it. So sorry, I had mentioned a second ago. I thought we were going to a different question. I mentioned that this is going to be like similar to an England game, but with having them with Germany playing in the Euros, I felt like this is a team that It's going to be interesting because all of these players, this is a young team with Germany. And one of the things going into the Euros was whether or not they were, how they were going to be defensively, and a young squad. But I think the Euros prove that this team is like ready to get back to where they are. They have a little bit of a different flair in the midfield than they've had in the past. So I think going back to what I said, it's an excellent matchup for this team. And to not have played each other for 5 years, to be able to meet at this critical point for both of these teams is massive and exciting, really.
Mm-hmm.
Let's chat a little bit more about the opposition here. So we went down some of the history of this team in terms of their head-to-head against the United States, how there's a bit of a gap in terms of the last time these two teams previously met. But in terms of personnel, we've known for a little while who the United States is going to be taking to participate in each of these friendlies. And we know very well at this point in the year who is also going to be missing. We know that the United States has a ton of players that they are keeping an eye on in terms of recoveries from injuries. But I think part of the excitement, right, between these two sides going head to head, yes, that they're, two top 10 ranked teams who have some good history between each other. But the Germans that are going to be participating in this match, I'm very, very excited to perhaps get to see some individual battles on the pitch, right? But I know that maybe not as big as the United States, but there's going to be a couple, heavy hitters who are missing for Germany as well. Like, I'm super disappointed that we're not going to be able to see somebody like a Julia Gwynn, participate in this international window. Awesome player. And then obviously somebody like Leah Schuler, who's now a bit of an injury, out with injury as well. So there's a couple like big heavy hitter kind of type of names that people might be familiar with if they were keeping a really close eye on the Euros specifically this past summer, who are not going to be participating in this match. But I still think even with a couple of the injuries on both sides here, that it's going to be a really, really, really competitive couple of matches between these two sides. I know for myself personally, I'm super excited to see, somebody like Lena McGool and what challenges she's going to present for the United States in that middle third specifically, because I know, especially recently, kind of post CONCACAF W Championship, that's an area that we've chatted a bit about in terms of the United States women's national team, that we're looking for something a little bit more in this middle third when it comes to the United States. So I'm very curious of what that looks like when they're going up against an opposition that has somebody like Alina McGold. Lori, I'm going to go with you to this because you were actually on call for the Euros. You got to see a lot of some of these games. When we're looking at like middle thirds here, how do you think things might play out for this first game particularly?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest question. I mean, we've talked about it here. I mean, it's floating around, as you just mentioned, Sandra, like, what does the U.S. midfield look like, going forward? I mean, that is one area I think that everybody knows that we need to kind of like solidify and lock down and overall just improve in terms of playmaking ability and be able to connect the lines. But that's where I think is most interesting about this matchup in particular, is because this was my favorite midfield in the Euros. You have not only McGool, but you also have Oberdorf, who is just a boss in the midfield. I'm pumped to see her play as well. And there's like a Spanish-esque about style of play to these players. So you still have kind of like the direct and competitive kind of like strong German side that we're used to seeing, with like a bit more flair and a bit of a Spanish style throughout the midfield. So I'll be curious, because mainly one thing that I thought was really fascinating about the German team in the Euros is McGool push high. They also rotate their midfielders wide sometimes, and then drop like a player like Pop. Sheila's out injured, so she won't be in there. But the rotation is really interesting. And at times they also keep their three strikers really narrow. That allows their outside backs to get higher. So then there's going to be overloads on our center backs or our back line as well, with players like McGool, as you mentioned, Sandra, running through. So I say all of that, even though we don't have a drawing board. just meaning that there are going to be overloads in the midfield. And how do we deal with that? I think is going to be a really interesting conversation, maybe dilemma, maybe not, depending. However, I also think this is a German team that can counterattack quickly, and they were excellent at that in the Euros. So how do we deal with once they get behind us? So again, I think the questions about this is like, does Black go with 2, 6s? Do we switch it up and go with a 4-2-3-1 instead of a straight up 4-3-3? Time will tell, I guess, tomorrow at 7 p.m. when we starting. But how do we change like the tactics a little bit to deal with that? And I mean, and vice versa, they have to deal with what we have going forward. We saw that with England, right? I mean, the Trinity Rodman goal that was disallowed. However, you put together 5 passes or however many it was, and we counterattack on them like they've never been counterattacked on before. So I think we can do the same to Germany. So they're going to have to answer questions. Just, I feel as of the games as of late, Germany is going to be more comfortable in possession than we have been, especially in the middle third. And
to follow, I don't want to cut you off. Sorry. So to follow up, I just wanted to say, so like, would you like to see maybe like the United States and possibly either of these 2 games, like maybe lean into the fact that they could be a pretty good transitional team?
Yeah, I don't see why we don't go with that.
I think they have to, with the strengths that the United States has and the speed that they have up top. I think why not? Especially when, Lori, as you said, you look at the midfield battle. I think that if the ball is played too much in the midfield with the United States versus Germany's midfield, we got to find the ball to our forwards' feet in the United States, because once you get the ball higher up the pitch, that's who you want to be running and having the ball, right? Like, you want players like Sophia Smith, even Trinity Rodman on the ball. If you look at the attacking players, Rose Lavelle in the midfield, that's who we want on the ball running at Germany's back line, but it has to happen quick. Like a few passes out of the back, 1-2 touches and get it up.
I just love the fluidity like that we have seen in recent gameplay from Germany. I'm 100% in agreement with you, in terms of especially what we saw from them during the Euros. Even in that final against England, how it at any point you could it's like a kind of like a front 6. Like you just sort of see like Germany able to just sort of kind of, like I said, kind of meld within their midfield and attack at times. And it's kind of scary. It could get kind of scary at moments if you don't have like, a good middle third to sort of counteract that, at moments. So, I mean, it's something like even when in their roster got dropped, I love that like when Germany drops their roster, it's like it's separated into like defense and attack, and like that's like, you know what I mean? Like that's it. Like they don't do like, it's like here's our defenders and here's our midfielders and here's our forwards. Yeah. It's like, no, here's some attackers and here's some defenders, and they're all
going to cause chaos.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that's what they did. I mean, we were on the call for their first game against Denmark was 4-0, and so they just like, it was attack versus in defend. Like it was like they just threw players forward, but in like such a sophisticated, fluid way that I was like, this team is dynamite. And so hopefully we'll see a bit about that, because that's what you ultimately want in these games. You want to be tested. You want to find out about yourself. And, to the question about counterattacking, I think back to the England game, the times that we were most exposed is when we were stretched between the lines and you saw the midfield of England be able to find space in between and then go at pace. So sometimes I don't understand why we don't just drop back a little bit. It doesn't have to be a low block necessarily, but just stay tight and then open up, force teams to have to possess against us, and then open up the space in behind and then go and lean into that a bit. And then there's going to obviously be ebbs and flows to that, but then you can manage the game in a variety of ways. And if we have possession, then, the roles are clear, especially in the midfield on if you're going to sit with 2 a bit deeper in the midfield at times. But then when you go forward, who's stepping into the holes to stop the counterattacks, right? To stop.
Yeah. I want to ask you, Lori, a little convo about this, because as you mentioned, talking about Germany's midfield and how they can stack centrally, and there can be a lot of overboard players down the middle and down the spine of them, especially when they're going into the attack, and the questions that it will ask of the United States like sixes, right? If there's two in there or if there's one, and then the two center backs and how they handle that and how they deal with the pressure of players like Magul or Oberdorf, like pushing up higher throughout those central spaces. And what we saw versus the United States versus England and versus Spain, how they handled those late runs coming out of the midfield. Do you think that there is going to be some questions asked of the United States center backs, and especially depending on who is paired back there?
Oh yeah, certainly. But I think that's always right. I mean, there's always going to be those questions asked, and I think it's just about how do you say? It's just about like communication, essentially, between the center backs and whoever's playing in those holding mid positions or the holding mid position. I think the biggest thing though is the communication, staying tight between the lines, as we said, but then having one of those holding mids or midfielder wanting to get on the ball. I think you have to have somebody that immediately, as soon as it's turned over, you have to have, and we regain possession, look to connect, right? If it's not on to go in behind, then we have to want sixes. And as of late, it feels like the tactics have been that like the six stays out and opens up passing lanes to higher up. But I'm like, get the six on the ball. Let's move it around. Let's get a grip of the game, and then we can build into our own possession at times. So